Pre-show quid pro quo. Gaius, you get one question. It could be any question in the world. It can be, what was a better comic strip in the newspapers? Was it The Far Side or Calvin and Hobbes? It can be, what is my favorite Greek deity? It can be, what is my opinion of teddy bears? Go ahead, get one question. Fire away.
Okay, well, it's because it's the Chaos Magic episode. I have to do something that's obviously going to throw you off, right?
Oh, sure, go for it.
All right. The internet must know boxers or briefs.
Boxers, 100%.
Oh, so you're like a bad boy. Like, so we know
That's
Doug's like, if you wear boxers, you're a bad boy. Like, briefs are cultured.
That's right.
Boxers are
Yeah.
bad boys.
Yeah, it's exactly. No, I'm not going to lie, and it's not because I'm trying to make myself look cool, but when it comes to summer, very often I will go commando. And I apologize if I meet you IRL, but just be aware that if I do, and it is the middle of summer, chances are I'm not wearing any underwear. This part of the Scots heritage that I have within me. It's just we get an allergy to underwear or any garments touching our nether regions within the summer months. So I just want everybody to know that if I could wear a kilt all day, I would. Maybe I should say that. But if I have to put something on, they must be more than 95% cotton. I'm just going to put it that way. So, yeah, man's got to have standards. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you got to have standards.
Great question, G. Thank you. Hey everybody, welcome to What Magic Is This, a podcast that spells chaos with a K and magic without one. My name is Douglas Batchelor, and in this show we're going to be talking about magic, the occult, the paranormal, the esoteric, the supernatural, and the weird. And if you've never listened to this show, what happens is that I have a guest on. And before they come on and record, I give them a list of about 15 topics. They get to choose one, and then I bring them in and we talk about it, basically. A lot of people ask, well, your guest doesn't do a lot of talking. And I say, you know what, try to think of these as a tutoring session where I do a lot of the talking, but if the student has a question for the tutor, then they can ask it, and it will most likely try to be answered in some way, shape, or form, as fun as that sounds. My guest today is a very special guest. His name is Gaius. Gaius, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm wonderful. There's nothing I enjoy more than recording a podcast in a closed apartment when it is nearly 40 degrees. That is my idea of a fun time. Truth be told, I really do love recording this podcast. It's my favorite thing to do. I just wish the weather was a little bit better. I have to ask the question, you yourself are a magician, are you not?
I use sorcerer, but that's just
Sorcerer.
I never can really decide. I just like sorcerer, I guess, when it comes down to it. I like it.
Perfect. Go for it. How long have you been a sorcerer for?
2-ish years, but like
2?
that's I don't know officially. It's one of those things where I think if you get into magic, you kind of like look back at things you used to do in the past, and you're like, oh, I was,
Right.
So I don't know if anyone ever can really point to like, oh, that was when and there. It's like, yeah, you probably were already doing it, but you didn't know.
Absolutely. And how has this 2 years been for you? Have you been enjoying your time, or?
I didn't expect how weird it would get. I didn't, like I was like, wanting to win the gift cards at work because like, well, if you can do that, you can do that. And like,
Right.
that also, well, you obviously know the weirdness that can start to swirl around you when you start to do it.
Right. I hear
Yeah,
you.
you don't get out of it, I don't think. I don't think you can just do practical enchantments and get out of the extracurricular activities that you get wrapped up in.
Oh, I see this magic thing's work. I'm just going to stop doing it now. Well, that's okay. I'm just going to go on with my life.
Yeah. I don't see how you could do that.
You did allude to it earlier. You have chosen the topic of chaos magic. And I have something to tell everybody. Normally, before towards the end of a month, I will try and get my next 3 guests on. I usually try to have 5, 3 that I've lined up, and then 2 in the chamber kind of thing in case one of them drops out, which happens quite often. And so I send them all the same email for the topics all at the same time. And I did that for July of 2020. And I got back an email from 2 of my guests wanting to do the same topic of chaos magic. And I literally received the emails within a half an hour of each other. Of course, I started to panic, because you would. Who would I have to let down? Do I have to get them to draw straws? Do I have to get them to Rochambeau somehow digitally? What's going to go on here? And then I thought, you know what? Guess what? Both of them can have chaos magic. Chaos magic is one of those things that I think is so vitally important, and it certainly is for me, because I started doing practical magic with chaos magic. I said, you know what? We have to do a two-parter. So this is going to be the first part of the chaos magic segment. And truth be told, there's probably going to be quite a few episodes on chaos magic. I don't think I can keep it to 2 episodes. So this is going to be the first part, and in this one is going to be more of an introduction to chaos magic. A little bit of history. We're going to talk about some books. We're going to have a great time. So this is not going to be all-encompassing, because I really don't think you can do that in one episode. And anybody who says that they can is lying to you, and I would never lie to you. So, Gaius, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So, what is chaos magic? Now, it's tough, because baked into chaos magic, because it is so individualized usually, whoever you ask what chaos magic might be, you will get a different answer as to what it is. If we can, in some small way, I think most would agree with this, we could say that it is, and it was, a movement that eschewed absolutes in favor of results. It was a magic that was based around getting results from what you did, and it would take from certain traditions, certain things, and it would test them, and it would try them, and did you get the result that you wanted? If it works, it works, and that is the paradigm of chaos magic. And they would use belief as a tool. They would take a look at all these old traditions, and they say, okay, they seem somehow similar, but it seems to be the belief in these things that allows this magic to work. It is probably, in my opinion, it could be debatable that it is the first postmodern magical movement. Would you agree at all with that, guys?
Yeah, because they're kind of arguing a few times for the knowability of truth.
Right.
Or there is, yeah. So that is postmodernism, is that everything is sort of subjective, and so I think that's fair.
Older traditions, they would say that they all seem to be symbol systems of an arbitrary nature, but it is the belief in them is where the rice gets cooked for magic. And it was in its heyday from about the late 70s to 2010-ish, although it has not gone away in any way, shape, or form, and we will talk about this. The name chaos magic is a bit of a thing. The word chaos was used in the book Liber Null, which we will talk about, but in the 80s, there was a lot of talk about chaos theory and whatnot. It was an author by the name of James Gleick who wrote a book just called Chaos, I believe. Incidentally, the character of Malcolm from Jurassic Park is based off of this guy, Gleick. Just so everybody knows. There you go. You got to get some Jurassic Park in there somehow. Not long ago, it was conceived. It is the kind of magic, chaos magic, where Superman has as much power in rituals and gnosis as Apollo. But this idea has kind of fallen away a little bit, and chaos magic has been restored by various figures who have gotten away from this idea of chaos magic. But we will touch on this later as well. I think the best quote that I have found about chaos magic comes from Lionel Snell, who is a character that we will talk about a bit more the next episode. Here's what he had to say about chaos magic. It is desirable to elect beliefs which offer greater scope for magical results. The belief that our world is but a shadow play of mighty cosmic forces which can be manipulated by human wisdom. That is a pretty good magical belief. That the world was made by one God who forbids the use of magic is less useful. One of the worst possible magical beliefs is that our world is made of solid matter shaped only by chance, within which human consciousness is mere epiphenomena. Magic-wise, it's utter useless crap, and yet it is a belief heavily endorsed by our scientific culture. I don't care if you break the rules, but you have to know them cold if you're going to break them to good effect. The individual should experiment with as many techniques as he can find or invent in order to immediately discard those which are obviously not suitable, for whatever reasons. He can then concentrate his attention on the mastery of the remaining techniques. So what Lionel was talking about towards the end there is that it is, for the most part, relies a lot on solo work. It is the work you do as one magician. You're not part of a group. You're not in the OTO, although you can be. But it's mainly you do what you have to do to yourself, and then you check the results. And if something doesn't work, you move on. If something does work, you hold on to it, and then you tinker with it. And then if it stops working, you move to something else. Would you agree with this assessment of what chaos magic is, guys?
Yes, I would.
Perfect. So what we have to talk about before we really get into chaos magic proper is what was before chaos magic, specifically in England. Gaius, what do you think magic in general was like in England before chaos magic came around?
At least in America, I know it was a lot of Wicca.
Yeah.
Because when I talk to the old school pagans at the metaphysical shop, they tell me all of it. It was just all Wicca. Like, that was it. Like, you had Buckland's book.
Right.
That's it. You had Buckland's big blue book, and that was what you had, and that's all you got for in the middle of Ohio, at least.
Right.
In like 70s and 60s. That's what they tell me.
It wasn't too different in England. You had a lot of neo-paganism. The movie The Wicker Man came out, and that was kind of what solidified in people's minds about what these neo-pagans got into. A lot of traipsing through woods or visiting monolithic sites and lighting candles and dancing around naked. And truth be told, this did happen. As Gaius mentioned, though, Wicca was very big. Gerald Gardner was a huge figure in and around the 70s, or at least his work was. And Wicca was quite a huge thing. The book The Morning of the Magicians, which I will talk about in a different episode, was very big, and it had huge impact and influence in the mid to late 60s counterculture. You also had a bit of the burnout from the 60s, of course, with a lot of people that were doing drugs, that kind of fun stuff. And it was starting to fade away by the mid, not fade away. It was a bit played out, and there were types that fried their brain, basically. You had, even in England, I know he was a North American figure, but even in England, Carlos Castaneda. How would you explain Castaneda to the folks, guys?
I read his book when I was in high school, but I don't remember a whole lot of them. Didn't he end up not being, wasn't it all fabricated in the end?
So he was a guy who, I believe he was an anthropologist, and he went to a place in Mexico. I think he found a gentleman by the name of Don Juan, who was a spiritual teacher, and this teacher would tell him about all these crazy things and abilities that he has as a witch. And turns out probably this Don Juan character never existed at any point, but they were very popular. And should be told, I don't hate on Castaneda. The Power of Silence, I think, is actually it's a great read of a book, but very popular, extremely popular. You had characters in England like Sybil Leek, who was a neo-pagan witch. She was one of the figures that a lot of newspapers would talk about because she was a little bit wacky. No shade to her. I like Sybil Leek in some respects. She had a pet jackdaw that she called Hotfoot Jackson, which I think is pretty awesome. For those that don't know, jackdaws, it's a bird. But this idea of, the people that go out in the woods and dress up and this kind of stuff, Sybil Leek was an epitome of this. You still had the Golden Dawn style magic happening all around, and you had a bunch of orders of the OTO, and they would all fight with each other, and that's just kind of what happens. Have you ever heard of Amato Crowley?
No.
So he was a really interesting character. In 1971, he came out. He was 40 years old, by the way. He came out and he said that he was the illegitimate son of Aleister Crowley. And he released a bunch of books, basically just slagging off his supposed deadbeat father. His books are really they're interesting. I'll just put it that way. I doubt that he was Aleister Crowley's son in any way, but he sold a lot of books. I'll just put it that way. But he was a figure that was around at the time. You also had this stuff where the idea of psychology in magic, where it was being promulgated quite a bit, and that magic is really just wayward psychology. It's all in your mind, man, and this is just a different way of circumventing that, and that's all this is. All the symbols, those are just, they could be archetypes, but the archetypes, it's all in your head. It doesn't really matter, and that's why we do this. Left-hand path, right-hand path stuff, that was all in the mix there too. Whole lot of Eastern approaches, a lot of it really appropriative was going on, but yes, yoga was starting to become a big thing, and it drifted into magic as well. But there were some bright spots, and it's not all bad. My favorite, and one that you have talked about, is a book by Paul Hewson called Mastering Witchcraft, which came out in 1970. What would you say about Mastering Witchcraft, guys?
It's a classic. I don't know, that book is near and dear to me. It was like the first one that I just like, oh, I can really do this. And then like I did it and things happened. You know, the best bit, the Lord's Prayer backwards, like
That's how it starts. That's like the start of the book.
the yeah, it's a good start. I don't know, like my experience with that actually was spectacular.
Right. You had a dream, did you not?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, God, it was just weird. It was everybody looks at a top-down view of where they live on Google Maps.
Right.
Everyone does it.
Yeah.
And I got that, but at night and with like my kids' toy, like we just moved into the house, so like, but I'm seeing like my kids' toys in the backyard. Like I was actually up there. It's just so weird to be. It was out of place,
Right.
almost to be like above your own home and to feel that and to feel so unbounded. The ecstatic emotions you feel that way when you're flying is like incredible, and that was my experience with that. With that first part, and that's the book that really like got me out of the armchair and just
Right.
going sprinting down the line, and it served me well. That book
Absolutely.
has served me well.
I have a very fond. Yes, I will just say that that book, it was released in the tail end of the hippie flower power thing, and Paul Hewson releases a book that's downright diabolical. It's in my opinion, it's one of those books that I think everybody should give it a shot, because it is quite simple, and you do get some really interesting results. Another bright spot was a bright spot. I wouldn't know say it was a bright spot, but an interesting spot was a gentleman by the name of Kenneth Grant, who loomed large over magic. He was a fairly mysterious figure. Not a lot of photographs of this guy. He was friends with Austin Osman Spare, who we'll talk about a little bit, but he was also he was one of Crowley's confidants towards the end of his life, so probably the two biggest figures for magic in the 20th century. This guy knew both of them, and he had his own order that was the Typhonian OTO. Kenneth Grant will get his own episode, but yeah, very interesting. His works were, specifically his stuff on Austin Osman Spare, was hugely influential on chaos magic later on. Indeed, early chaos magic looked like smashing bits of Austin Osman Spare, Aleister Crowley, these two figures together. And incidentally, these two very well might have actually smashed their bits together once upon a time, if you know what I'm saying. Anyways, that's a sex joke. Basically, what I'm trying to say with this little section is that magic was in a goddamn rut, and it was a very strange period of time. And there's a ton of comparisons made towards chaos magic and punk rock, and specifically in England. And I could do a whole episode about it. The comparison is somewhat apt due to the fact that music in the mid-70s was overblown, a lot of synthesizers, a lot of 10-minute drum solos. It just wasn't rock music. And then you get this younger group that's like, hey, rock music is a singer, a guitar, the drums, and a bass guitar. You got 3 minutes, you got 4 chords, you make a great song, and then that's what works, and that's what the kids want to hear, and that's what people are attracted to. The chaos magic was like that. You have the basics of magic, and we go back to these, and we tinker with them, and then you get really good magic, and then, of course, all the kids will want to be part of it. A true and faithful relation to the history of chaos magic is impossible. The figures that defined chaos magic, they all seem to have varying accounts. To my knowledge, a book solely dedicated to the history of chaos magic doesn't exist, which I find very odd in this day and age. Jock Hawkins, she wrote a book called the Chaonomicon, which comes close. It's an interesting one. For my money, there's a book by a gentleman called Dave Evans. The book is called The History of English Magic After Crowley. It's very good. It's worth reading, certainly, and it's interesting if magic in the 20th century in England is interesting to you. Chaos magic had a couple of places, but the biggest place that it probably came out of was London in the mid-70s. There were a loose collection of occultists called the Stoke Newington Sorcerers. And they were doing some interesting stuff with magic. It was very Crowley, very Austin Osman Spare. And one of their members was a chap by the name of Peter J. Carroll. Another member was Ray Sherwin, who was an editor of a magazine called The New Equinox. And Aleister Crowley had a magazine called The Equinox. It was like early chaos magic, a lot of Crowley, a lot of Austin Spare. These fellows, they got a little bit disillusioned with magic and what they were doing. So they formed a non-hierarchical order called the Pact of the Illuminates of Thanateros. This group was also known as the Pact. I like that a little bit more, the Pact. That's interesting to me.
Better name.
Yeah, I'd say so. Chaos Magic kicked off proper in 1978 with the book Liber Null by Peter Carroll and the Book of Results by Ray Sherwin. Leeds became a very interesting place for chaos magic. Leeds is in West Yorkshire in England. I'm sure we all know where Yorkshire is in England. Very good pig country. A hotspot in Leeds was a bookshop called the Sorcerer's Apprentice, which is a pretty badass name for a bookshop, I have to say myself. And they would publish a lot of these early chaos magicians' work, and it became a hub. Soon after, lots of small groups kind of formed around the IoT, and they would have groups of people that would meet up and they would do stuff, and then they'd go apart and they'd do their solo rituals and they'd come back, and so it was very experimental. Again, very punk rock. It's awesome, right? Frankly, the history of a movement based around the techniques in solo work is tough, unlike Thelema or the Golden Dawn or Wicca, because tossing aside tradition renders its history somewhat less important to its own story, strangely enough. But groups did form. There was the Circle of Chaos, in which Dave Lee was a member, and there were orders in Australia and in, to a lesser extent, America, but there was also a group that was in Germany. The 80s was an interesting time for chaos magic. There were plenty of individuals and groups kind of adding their own spice to the stew. Also in the late 70s and the early 80s, you have Robert Anton Wilson's Discordianism enter in there. The book, the Illuminatus trilogy, started to become very big. These Discordian ideas, but more so the idea of agnosticism was really big. Again, talking about being able to shift beliefs as to that's where good magic comes from, belief. Chaos magic kind of took the dictum for a while from Hassan Isabah, which is nothing is true, everything is permitted, right? One of the guys who was really big onto this was Genesis P. Orridge. This was the lead singer and one of the forces within the band Throbbing Gristle, which was an industrial band in England. They were the destroyers of civilization. After Throbbing Gristle, Genesis P. Orridge started a group called the Temple of Psychic Youth. They started to introduce things like William Burroughs into the mix, as well as William Burroughs and Brian Geison's cut-up techniques, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Through the Temple of Psychic Youth, chaos magic kind of enters subculture a little bit, and things like acid house and through musical movements in England. Peter Carroll had Liber Null, as well as another book called Psychonaut, published in one book by a New York publishing company, which was Wiser, in 1987, and then it just started to grow more and more. He followed this by releasing a book called Liber Chaos, with a K, and the book called Cyber Magic in the early 90s. Now, there was an unfortunate circumstance involving the translator of Liber Null into German, a fellow by the name of Ralph Teichtmeier. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but anyways, everybody knows him as Frater UD, or I will call him Frater UD, or Frater U, therefore D, therefore. That's a joke, and if you get it, good for you. But he was chumming with some unsavory folks in Germany, and he was harboring some, I'm just going to call it atavistic racist bullshit. This became known as the Ice Wars, which I find extremely boring, so I'm not going to talk a ton about it, but what could you tell the folks about the Ice Wars, Gaius?
At least from what I understand it, he had the notion that only Germans or Nords could do ice magic. Yeah. And that really did not bode well with a bunch of people who think that nothing is true and everything is permitted. Right. It's a little bit counter the,
He was introducing a lot of the old, this old song and dance, the whole Thule mythology that it all gets wrapped up in this seemingly Aryan nonsense, and he was a member of the IoT for a while. His books are still available, and truth be told, they're still popular with some people. I'm just going to leave it there. Yes, I'm just going to leave it there. Suffice to say, it was a thing. It was certainly a thing within the chaos magic community that existed at the time. Frater UD, or He was ejected from the IoT, there was a little kerfuffle, and in 1995, somewhat exhausted by the ice wars and other bullshit, Peter J. Carroll retired from magic and dipped his feet in speculative physics and science. Now, people familiar with chaos magic in the 80s, they began to include chaos magic in the things that they would write, in things like comic books and video games and other projects. Probably this would hit about the mid-90s or so, not least of which is Grant Morrison, whose comic The Invisibles is one of the most eloquent, albeit weird, promulgations of chaos magic. Have you read The Invisibles, Gaius?
I actually have not read The Invisibles.
No?
Yeah.
No, it's all
I
good,
need
man.
to.
You definitely do. I think a lot of... No, I might get in some trouble here. I love it. I absolutely adore it. The first half is staggeringly brilliant. The last half is downright weird, but still engaging as all hell. Yeah, the ideas of chaos magic started to come through. And this book was published by Vertigo, which is under DC. So it was a very popular thing, and I talked about it a bit in the Sigils episode. So around this point, chaos magic becomes locked up with the idea that anything goes, right? Anything goes. Everything is permitted. So characters from books or comics are as useful as old gods to a lot of people in and around this time. Towards the end of the 20th century, things like the Disinformation Company started to talk about chaos magic in their articles online. It was a website, basically. It was kind of refueled in a way, and it was big. And this is actually where I come into the magic story. It was through Grant Morrison and through Disinformation, and I caught that bug. So that was 2003, basically, when that happened for me. I was a little late to the party, but what can you say? Then after this was a period of cooling. And we enter something that we'll talk about in a little bit called post-chaos, if we can call it anything, really. The very uneasy realization that perhaps older traditions are indeed more useful started to enter the conversation. And Phil Hine, he had a comment that chaos culture lacks an overall vision of progression into a shared future. It does not have any shared goal to strive for. There's a gentleman by the name of Joel Barocco. He had a magazine called Chaos Magazine, which was about magic, and it had about a 13-year cooling down period, and then he started to produce more. I believe it was at issue 14. He basically postulated that chaos magic was, for the most part, somewhat ahistorical, and that they were due to run on the spot, never swelling in progress, basically. So we saw a return to a lot of older traditions around this time. A lot of chaos magicians just started to say, like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, so I'll just go back to, I don't know, doing Golden Dawn stuff or Thelema. And and things that weren't really utilized too often within magic, with the chaos magic toolkit. Luckily, some things like grimoires came up, but that's an episode for another time. Joe Barocco said that I didn't kill the chaos current. I actually saved it for the future. Pretty lofty claim, I'd say. Nowadays, chaos magic is seen less as a movement than ever before, but a toolkit or an initial impulse in how one can touch on many traditions as long as there are results. And the history of chaos magic is still being written. Yeah, that's basically the history up to now. And of course, I've bounced around and missed out a lot of stuff. You ask any chaos magician what they're going to say about the history of chaos, you're going to get a different answer. When I sent the list of topics to you guys, like immediately you were emphatic, like chaos magic, I got to talk about chaos magic. I'm just buying so many books about chaos magic. So
yeah.
How's your little dive into chaos magic been? Has it been fun? Has it been interesting? Because when I first got in, it was so exciting to me.
So like when I first heard of it, I liked it, but then I ran into that crowd where like anything goes and it's chaos without joy. I don't know how to describe it. The way these
buddy, yeah, absolutely, yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And so I hated it, and then I started reading Gordon White, and then I liked it again, and so it's always been a journey where I love hate chaos magic. I want to call myself a chaos magician some days, and some days I don't, and but I enjoy those type of relationships, so it's kind of perfect.
There you go.
Yeah.
The push and pull. One of these days, the cops will pull up to the trailer park where you are doing your little magic there, and they'll try to pull you away from chaos magic. But no, I can't. I love him. No, don't arrest him. Chaos magic. Don't arrest chaos magic.
Well, it challenges you.
It does.
Like, well, you mentioned the whole using fictional characters. I always feel like that started with Condensed Chaos with Phil
Yeah,
Hine.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like a page. No, I kind of almost remember because it haunts me. It's on page 142,
Whoa.
midway through the page, and he's like, "Well, you could use Spock," and it's like,
Well, I think he talked about it even before because he released a small pamphlet called Oven Ready Chaos in the 80s where he talked about that. But he definitely went further with it in Condensed Chaos when it was published in the mid 90s, I believe. But yeah, Oven Ready Chaos, I think is what it was called. It could have also been called Condensed Chaos. But yeah, it was just like you can use characters from the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I think was the one that he talked about. But yeah, it's still one of those things that follows Chaos Magic around to this day, I would say.
yeah. Well, it can haunt you in a good way too, because like I hated the idea, and like I was like, no, 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 Phil, no. And then I came back to it, and I was like, all right, but what does that make me wonder about what they actually are?
Right.
It allows you to ask that question, and it's almost people misread it. That's my opinion of it now. It's like when people are like, I'm going to summon Scrooge McDuck, like you need to go back and reread that. Like,
Agree entirely.
yeah, sit with it, because like that goes well, like that lets you go, those things are maybe more than any of all that. So I don't know, that's
Yeah.
my opinion on it, and that's why I kind of love hate Chaos Magic, because it challenged me so much on that idea that I got more out of the idea than just sitting going, no, it has to be Apollo.
Right, right, exactly. It's fantastic. There's a couple of figures we need to talk about because, again, it is based around a lot of individual people. Before Chaos Magic, as I mentioned, the two biggest figures, and early Chaos Magic seemed to look like it came from a lot of these two guys. The first is Aleister Crowley. Again, he's going to get his own episode. When? I don't know. Stop asking. But he was important because, again, Carol and Sherwin were fans, especially in the early years, as I said. But why was he somewhat important? Less to do with the Kabbalah stuff, more so to do with something, and I've got one of his biographies. It's this aspect, I think, that was very appealing to the early Chaos magicians, and this is from Tobias Churton's Aleister Crowley, which is definitely worth a read, in my opinion. Crowley introduced the principle of relativity into magic and mysticism. Cultural conditioning shapes the symbols of spiritual experience, state of mind, conditions, experience. A yogi, Crowley wrote, gets as much pleasure from moving his leg as a millionaire gets from a week in New York. Crowley was definitely very big figure, but even bigger than Crowley was Austin Osman Spare. Now, why would this be? It was through Kenneth Grant's writing. It had a large part in why Austin Spare was such a huge figure. It's not so much about what Spare wrote to begin with, but more about what, and this could be debatable, but more so about what Kenneth said that this is what Austin Spare's magic was. You can read into it if you want to. Again, it is debatable. Austin Spare's techniques were very appealing to early Chaos magicians to seek out his work and look at the Book of Pleasure and try and figure it out. His big thing was playing a trick or a sleight of mind, if you will. Spare was really big into earlier concepts, very young concepts of psychology and psychiatry, and he rejigged them, or at least his understandings of them, in a magical way. The idea of the sub or unconscious mind was very pertinent to Spare. He said that you could trick the mind in these states to turn obsessions into desires and then to plant these into these other forms of consciousness, and then you've got some magic. He had this idea called Kia. Do you know about Kia at all?
Yes.
Well, how would you describe Kia?
Well, wasn't like Bear's whole thing also was like the death of belief and the invocation of I, and like
Yeah.
you can understand why Chaos Magic was who were playing with the idea that there is no certainty to belief.
Yeah.
Would just gravitate to Spare the moment that they had ever brushed up against his work.
He's a breath of fresh air. I'm going to say, like in any age, when you, I mean, if you can if you can understand what he's writing about, it's so wild and out there. But he might be onto something here. His idea of Kia, for those who don't know, Peter Carroll described it as the elusive I, which centers self-awareness. It is a universal mind in which the unconscious mind and all other forms of consciousness are a part of. And this is most apparent in the idea of sigil magic, which I have done an episode on. So check in with that. The biggest figure, without a doubt, within Chaos Magic would be Peter J. Carroll. Now, what can we say about Peter Carroll? He's a genius, basically. I have to say this. He is an incredibly intelligent man. And for a load of us that are familiar with chaos magic for a while, Peter Carroll is chaos magic, plain and simple. He is intimidatingly smart. His work is crucial to understand chaos magic, and you can see the progression of how he thinks about magic through all of his work. Liber Null is considered the chaos magic Bible, in my opinion. He has changed his mind about much of his earlier work, as you can expect. He's not as popular as he should be because he uses a lot of mathematical and physics models within his books, and they're crammed with them. You'll get in there and you'll open up any one of his books, and there'll be like a formula in there. And then I know a lot of people that are immediately just like, I can't even bother. But he just added so much to modern magic, in my opinion. He has the wonderful quote that magic will not free itself from occultism until we have strangled the last astrologer with the guts of the last spiritual master. That's amazing. It's from Peter that I get my, to this day, ambivalence towards astrology. Might be an episode somehow in the future, but he, throughout most of his books, just says that astrology is garbage. And I'm warming up. And I know I've talked about, I only do spells when things are astrologically correct. And I have issues with astrology that I have to work through. I'll just say that. And the work never ends. I'm sure you would agree, guys. But
yeah. You might have the same relationship I have with chaos magic. Like
there you go. Yeah. I don't hate astrology. It's just Peter did such a good job of burying it for me. It's tough to exhume at this point, but I'm trying. I'm trying my best. Yes. As I mentioned, he left magic for a decade, and he started to work within science, and he started to speculate on physics, specifically the idea of three-dimensional time. That time is not a four-dimensional concept; it is a three-dimensional concept. Have you read any of this 3D time stuff that he?
Yes, no, like that stuff's great. Like
Yeah.
I actually really highly enjoy it. Even if you have to sit with some uncomfortable math.
What do you like about it?
Well, it's not just 3D time in particular. It's like I feel bad because I can't remember the exact quote in the book. But when he finally reaches the conclusion with all this theories of time and material and quantum wave collapse, he goes, "I can't say I'm a being. I'm not being. I'm doing."
Right.
And I see this as a dark illumination. I don't like it, but I have to use the idea out of its utility, which is like how creepily smart and yet humanizing of him, because he humbles himself. I don't like this idea. I have to use it because it's useful. It has utility.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, it's that kind of like, it's the only type of physics stuff I've ever read that put a chill down my spine.
There you go.
When he ends it on that note, it's like you sit uncomfortably.
I hate this shit, but guess what? It's something.
Yeah, and you have like sitting uncomfortably with like I'm not being, I'm a doing.
Yes.
And he's kind of clever in the sense that it almost seems like he's giving absolutes.
Right.
When you go through Carroll's work, when you start reading through it, he's very like, this is the science. He also cushions it with this sort of like, switching beliefs and, the typical chaos magic stuff. You start to realize that he starts to describe the utility of an idea.
Yes.
And like its level of correctness or technical correctness doesn't match its utility. And like, this is brilliant. And you can kind of see where the math comes from. Because I'm like, I'm not 100% sure you can go with this hyper sphere theory.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not a physicist, though. I am not a physicist.
It is compelling stuff, and when you finally start to wrap your head around it, it becomes a little bit more, okay, so this is actually quite palatable, and as you said, it's useful. Like, when you finally get it, he's onto something here. As I said, incredibly intelligent man. He said he only passed school with the lowest grades just so he could pass, but a lot of chaos magic's iconoclasm comes from Peter Carroll. He's still involved in chaos magic to some extent. He's got a blog online where he writes something maybe about once a month, but he is in his own world, and he always seems to be ahead of the pack, strangely enough. If you want to understand chaos magic, you have to understand Peter Carroll and his life. The second figure I want to talk about is Phil Hine. He was an early figure. I believe he was in and around Leeds when the chaos magic was starting to really get cooking then. He released the book Condensed Chaos, which we'll talk about in a little bit, which shed a lot of the elitism around chaos magic and it made it much more egalitarian. It was Phil Hine that was one of the big ones that said that anybody can do it, right? Like anyone can do chaos magic. It's really within you to do it. And there's a joy to all of Phil's work. He was also really big on, he wasn't the first, but he was definitely one of the bigger people to bring H.P. Lovecraft into chaos magic with I believe it's called the Psychonomicon. I talked about it a bit in the Necronomicon episode. Interesting, very interesting, but yeah, that was Phil Hine as well. He's also constantly fascinated with the idea of black magic or the left-hand path, and to this day, like if you have him on Twitter, he will still ask questions about what people think about the left-hand path, black magic, and this kind of thing, and he's still kind of around in chaos magic. He was also pretty big on talking, specifically on his blog, when it first started to come out, talking about the ideas of sexuality and chaos magic. Phil himself is bisexual, and it is very important. So, and I think it's something that doesn't get talked about a lot within magic. He has recently become a bit more interested in Eastern mysticism and Eastern approaches, which is very cool. And I know a lot of people that are really attracted to Phil's work because of this. And if you are, Phil's the guy to look up. That's his jam right now. And some of the things that he writes on his blog, I believe it's called enfolding.org. It'll be up in the show notes. It's really interesting and it's really cool and it's very down to earth. He's an eloquent man. He makes what he talks about very exciting. He's very good at this. And to this day, I would say he's a very crucial figure and one who has much to say. Let's talk a wee bit about Dave Lee. Now, Dave Lee was old guard chaos magic. He met Peter, Carroll, and Sherwin in Leeds as well. Again, Leeds is just a crazy place. Along with Genesis Pjorge, he was one of the big people to introduce William Burroughs and the cut-up technique that Burroughs came up with Brian Geisen to chaos magic. He's not as well known as he should be within chaos magic, but he's getting his due because he's being a bit more vocal about it. He has much to say about group work within chaos magic and group rituals, and he's focused a lot in the last little while with breath work and breathing, which I find quite interesting in it. He's also very great with stories. He tells some of the best stories about early chaos magic you can find. I'll put it up in the show notes, but there's one I think called like I Was There, and it's all about the IoT. It's engaging and it's really fun. So he's one of those chaos magic historians. We have to talk about Grant Morrison. People, I will do a Grant Morrison episode. I don't need to be reminded every 4 days to do a Grant Morrison episode. I will. I promise. I promise. I consider Grant the, almost more so than Phil, the popularizer of chaos magic. So he did a comic book in the late 80s called Batman Arkham Asylum, and it had wonderful release date of, I believe, the week or the month that Tim Burton's Batman. This book was released and it made a ton of money. I think there's a story of Grant Morrison getting called up by one of the editors and basically told Grant, oh, by the way, you don't have to work another day in your life. You've made so much money from the publishing of Arkham Asylum. He continued to write comic books. He was a subculture figure in the 80s. He was always around in there. But he blasted chaos magic into culture, and he made it large, and he made it sound incredibly sexy and approachable, much like Phil Hine. And it was through his essay or chapter in the Disinfo Book of Lies called Pop Magic, and through his performance where he did a large amount of acid before talking to an auditorium of people in New York City called DisinfoCon, that are seminal moments in chaos magic, at least for me. For me, that was the thing. It was specifically the DisinfoCon that got me started in magic. I know I've told this story so many times, but Pop Magic, after that was like, oh my God, I can do this. Anyone can do this. This is great. Waving the pirate flag of chaos magic most enthusiastically these days is the Australian author, blogger, and podcast host Gordon White. He has a website called Rune Soup, where a lot of his ideas are gaining a lot of traction, and it's the return of chaos magic through Gordon. He applies chaos magic to nearly every aspect of life. He updated sigils and added much to sigilization, added things like the robofish and shoaling, as well as low attention processing with the sigils. Gordon is all about things like adding context and comparison to chaos magic. He also said that we cannot disregard psi effects or UFOs, that they're all part of magic. He basically said that you can't disregard these things anymore. He's big, specifically over the last 6-7 years, of introducing the idea of animism back to magic quite a bit. He's quite fantastic in the sense that he promulgated a lot of Aboriginal and Indigenous importance to things like magical epistemologies. Those are some of the figures. Have I missed anybody from your side, guys?
Not that I can think of.
There is a figure called Ramsay Dukes that I will talk about a little bit more in the next episode. Most likely he will get his own episode for sure. I know everybody will be like, you're not talking about Ramsay Dukes. I will. So it's time to nerd out. We're going to talk about some books. Liber Nolan Psychonaut is a must-own book, in my opinion. This is the Bible for Chaos Magic. As I have said, it is that book. And it is probably not my favorite thing that Pete Carroll has ever written, but it is good. You've read Liber Nolan. What was your impression, guys?
Well, I liked Liber Nolan Psychonaut when I first got it and stuff, but I feel like it's always one of those books you have to reread.
Yeah.
And I don't...
All of Pete's books you have to reread.
Yeah. I think some people pick it up and get turned off real quickly, and you don't understand. You study that thing. You're not going to get it the first time you read. I don't know how else because Pete kind of defines chaos magic for me.
Yeah.
And there's no one. It's a je ne sais quoi type thing. But yeah, I don't know what. That's when you go, what is chaos magic? And it's like, I don't know what. You see it in Phil, and you see it in Gordon White, and you see it in Grant Morrison, and you see it in all these characters, and you see it in the, if you know other chaos practitioners, you know them sometimes. They have that I do not know what.
Yeah.
And that's like Pete for me and his ideas. It's like, I don't know what. It's just and Liber Nolan is oozes that.
Yeah.
It oozes it, and it's again, it's not his sharpest work, but
no.
You need it. You still you have to experience it. You have to experience Liber Nolan to really get it.
It is just one of those books that needs to be on everybody's shelf for magic, truthfully. There's no other way to cut it, in my opinion. It's not his sharpest book. For that, I have to say my favorite of his work is a book called The Octavo, which uses Terry Pratchett's Discworld as kind of like a launching point. I love this book. It is one of those books that, very much like what Gaius said, that you read a chapter, and then you have to read it again, and then you have to read it again, and then you have to read it again. It goes through certain kinds of spells, but it's not really a spell book in any way, shape, or form. But there's the spells of enchantment, and there's the spells of probability, and I'm forgetting some of them. But that, for me, is my favorite Pete Carroll book. There's just so much to unpack. You could do a full episode on Pete's work. The Octavo, for my money, is my favorite of his work. From what you've read, guys, what's your favorite Pete Carroll?
I'm going to mispronounce it, but the Apophthegm?
Apophthegm. Yeah.
The Apophthegm, yeah. Because I feel like I think that's the one where he had that humanizing moment about his dark illumination. It's I don't like it. And it's just, I really enjoy it. It's very, I don't know how to describe it, but to know that it's like that for him, just in that brief moment, then he goes right back into the math.
It's his treatise on cosmic panpsychism, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's worth reading. I enjoy it. I might be wrong, but that was his return to magic, right?
It was.
It's
right.
Yeah.
I remember looking at the back of it earlier today, and it was he's back from physics. It's great.
Yeah.
It's great.
Everybody's screaming, ah! And he did not disappoint. No, it's a great book. You can read all of his books. They're all so good. I've only read Epoch once because I knew somebody who had a copy of it, and it's a very expensive book. And it was also one of those whoa, what is Pete going on about? It's fantastic, for sure. In my opinion, you have to read all of Pete Carroll's books. You literally have to read every single one of them. We're going to talk about a book now that Gaius was actually quite happy that I was going to include. It's a book called Stealing the Fire from Heaven by Stephen Mace. What can you tell us about this book, guys?
It will get you into practical sorcery real quick. I mean, that was the first time I had heard the sigils called the Alphabet of Desire.
Okay.
That assisted with a deep dive on Spare.
Yeah.
Its cover even typically like I wanted to make fun of like the thing I would criticize Pete Carroll the most is get a new cover artist. Like they're so cheesy. They're like they remind me of
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Thulian Atlantean rune magic books, you know? Like they're
yeah.
the goofy stealing fire from heaven is so
It's red
like
and black.
and it
Red and
looks forbidden.
yeah.
You really get really introduced to the chaos magic ideas in a way that I feel is a little more organic than when you
Hmm.
just go chaos magic and like beat you on the head with it, like
Right.
most chaos magic books do, which is okay. That's fun.
It holds your hand quite well, I'd say. Like
Yeah.
it really does. And the thing about this book is that Austin Spare becomes incredibly graspable in this book. Like if you read any of Austin's work, it's so all over the place. Like I literally, and I'm not shitting you, I have a book called The Book of Pleasure in plain English. This one's like, this is what he was probably trying to say. And it's like, oh, that's really helpful. Stealing the Fire from Heaven is like, these are Spare's ideas. And you have things like the neither, nither, or the neither, nether, anyways. But he actually goes through it and he talks you through all of these processes and they're fantastic. It is very Spare heavy, a little bit of Crowley in there as well. Great banishing rituals. I think if you're coming from the Golden Dawn Thelema thing where it's all banishing rituals and this kind of stuff and you want to dip the toe in chaos magic, this is the book to buy. In my mind, it is a classic. It's kind with guiding you and it's really great in that respect, for sure. And then you get to call yourself a sorcerer.
Well, there's a lot of magicians out there nowadays, and witch is the most popular thing ever. So like if you really want to be the indie kid at the occult shop, you want to be a sorcerer like this.
There you go. I love it. Condensed Chaos. This was my book. For about 7 months when I first got into magic, this was with me all the time, and it was just I was constantly doing everything from Condensed Chaos by Phil Hine. There's so much great stuff in here. Everything from how to talk to certain deities is that if you want to petition them, you have to talk about, the great things that they did first. You got to big them up. You got to flatter them a little bit, and then you got to sneak like your little want in there. But first of all, you got to make a book big. Then ask for something. I love everything in Condensed Chaos. He also goes through something I think is very important and a lot of magicians forget, which is do easy. Try to do the easiest possible thing. And I know when, for myself, more specifically, it's like I get wrapped up in like, I want to go to the grimoires and I want to do Greco-Egyptian magic. And then I forget there's a better way of getting what my desires are than having to do this stuff. And I constantly forget it. And he's been with me from the very beginning through this book. And I don't think that I will ever get rid of my copy of Condensed Chaos. I'm just going to put it that way. This is the KISS, KISS, Chaos Magic book, as in keep it simple, stupid. This is the book.
I actually really enjoy it because I would describe it as he's approachable. I don't know how to say it. Well, Pete is scary. Pete's like, scary.
Intimidating.
And,
He's intimidating.
Yeah. And Hine's like your really cool uncle that's going to let you get away with stuff that you shouldn't be allowed to get. Yeah. And that's how I look at Condensed Chaos. And yeah, it's really, I would highly recommend it. There's a couple more books that have like come out that if someone were to go like, I need to know exactly what magic, it would be Condensed Chaos is still in like the top 3.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even considering all the other stuff that's available.
I get emails almost once every 2 days asking me like, what books do you recommend? And that list changes. But going back through my my little Gmail account for the podcast, from the very beginning, the very first time somebody asked me what book to recommend to them, Condensed Chaos was in there, and then maybe about 4 days ago, Condensed Chaos was still in there. The books that I recommend, all of them change except for this one. And yeah, I can't say more about it besides it's a fantastic, wonderful book. And yeah, one of my favorites, without a doubt. Chaotopia by Dave Lee. This is another process book, a lot like Condensed Chaos. There's much to learn from it. It's passed over others, but it does have a charm and potency all of its own. Certainly, it's definitely one of those books that needs to be recognized as being, in my opinion, being one of the classics of chaos magic. It came out somewhat, I believe it was early 21st century, but I could be wrong about that. But it is good. Have you read Chaotopia?
I actually have not.
No.
I have never engaged with any day leave where like I said, I always feel terrible when people, it's just, but I've got so much.
Yeah,
I'm so behind.
No, you're not behind, man. You're not behind in any way. You got to take your time with this stuff. And the thinking that you're behind, nah, man. There is more than enough for one lifetime, but you gotta, you just I know, right? You just gotta take your time and come to things when they come. And guess what? Sometimes things fall off for a little bit, and then you just discover them later. I don't want to say there's a time and place for everything, but there very well might be a time and place for everything. So everybody keep that in mind, and I have to remind myself this as well. It's like, oh, I have to get into djinn sorcery and this and this. Yeah, right now I don't know if I can, but I know it's there.
That's a bit of the chaos magician in you, you know, because
It
I know that's
is.
where I get it from too, where
Yeah.
it's like I first ever heard of like djinn sorcery. I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
and then like
I'm still got other things I have to work on right
dude,
now.
God.
Yeah.
I heard of hunting sorcery, and I was like
Hunting.
the first hunting sorcery, like holding like bits of holly to attract deer to you and stuff that they would do, and all types of like. I also heard of a Buddhist technique of forcing an animal's soul to reincarnate so it wouldn't haunt you.
Oh.
I was looking at bows online to like learn how to bow hunt like 20 minutes after just even hearing about it.
Right.
They had a book list going and like yeah, it's and I know that's the chaos magician in me because it's chaos magic is playful in
Yeah.
that way. Yeah, like it
Yeah.
wants you to it
Yeah.
invites you to explore those things. Like always.
Absolutely, 100%. And that's the problem is that when you see this new stuff in the back of your mind, it's that could be a year of my life, like just gone. Like
Yeah.
that could full on just be a year of my life gone. But if you can find it, and it is available online for free, and I'll have a show note on it. Chaos Magazine number 14 is an interesting historical document. As I mentioned, its editor Joel Barocco. He was one of the guys. He's the guy that said that he saved chaos magic, preserved it for the future. Issue 14 is a really interesting run. I think it revolves around the Babylon working from Jack Parsons. It's an interesting little document to look into. It's not a beginner's magazine, this one. You have to know a lot of the lore surrounding the Babylon working. I believe Alan Moore has an essay about Kenneth Grant, who just recently passed away when the book was published. Yeah, so it's an interesting thing to definitely look up. Visual Magic by Jan Fries, or Jan Fries. I'm not too sure how to pronounce it. I'm sorry, Jan. I apologize. I love this book. This is one of my favorites. It might be one of the best books for beginners, in my opinion. It goes through automatic writing and automatic drawing. Its onus is on individual rituals and approaches and creating your own shamanism. Please. He's got other works. They're all very, very good. Visual Magic is, I think, one of the better books that Chaos Magician needs to seek out, or if you're interested in Chaos Magic. Finally, from my end, we have a book called Pieces of Eight by Gordon White. Now, when people ask for recommendations, they say, like, give me one book. I want one book. I ask them two questions. The first question is, do you want to jump into doing practical magic like immediately? Do you want to like read a book and then you're starting to do spell work and this kind of thing and meditation and all that? If they say yes to that one, I'll say 6 Ways by Aidan Wachter. I'll ask also, like, do you want to think about magic first before starting to do the practical magic stuff? And if they say yes, this, please. I don't know. I'm a little bit trepidatious about the practical side. I'd like to get some of the deeper metaphysical stuff and the big questions about practical magic. I recommend Pieces of Eight by Gordon White. In my opinion, it is one of the most important magical books, period. And it's a somewhat new release. I believe it was 2016 or 2017. I could be wrong. But
2016.
2016 it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
looking at it recently. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it will be one of those books that belongs on everybody's shelf, which is funny because it's actually only an ebook.
Yeah, Pieces of Eight is something I like. It saved me from like that sort of grimoirist, like no, chaos magicians are stupid, and like actually like that was the book that I read from Gordon that made me like really reassess and able to like play with chaos magic again, because I totally fell into that trap where I would interact with people who call themselves chaos magicians.
Right.
And I would just be like, I don't want to put my pants on backwards and shout Marilyn Manson lyrics. And there would be so many people who would like justify something that just didn't seem to often to be because chaos magic. And Pieces of Eight was the counter reformation. He describes it as this counter reformation against all that, and he does it so great. I mean, the idea of animism that he introduced me to that too through that book. That is like an idea with an exceptional amount of utility.
Right.
And like Gordon knows a lot of credit for trying to bring that to the table, especially
Absolutely.
from a chaos magic perspective. Animism allows you to just build a relationship with anything around you.
Yeah.
When you can really apply some chaos magic rules there, and it's effective. Like just that concept is, at least I employ it, and I find it to be, yeah,
Yeah.
great.
For my money, I just think Pieces of Eight just nails chaos. It is a book specifically just about chaos magic, right? And yeah, one of my favorite books in magic ever. Basically, I'll say that. Is there any books that you can think of that I've missed out?
You mentioned Six Ways, so I think that was
Yeah.
the other one that I was like, that's the next to condensed chaos. If you want to just jump right in, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's Aiden's really like the way he approaches, like this is what's great about chaos magic. I can call them all chaos magicians and they all have that je ne sais quoi, like I said.
Yeah.
But like they're all doing something different. And like Aiden, like I really loved his stuff, like still stuff I do, but it's like dirt sorcery.
Yes.
And it feels, but like when you actually like start doing it and getting your hands in the rocks and the dirts and the sticks, I don't know, there's something to it. Like there is like it's more than just, I don't know. It's
No, I know exactly what you're saying.
you can blow the idea out about like dirt sorcery or just what dirt is like so much. I highly recommend that book. And
I'm entirely there with you. Yeah, I hear him talking about chaos magic. I don't know if he considers himself a chaos magician, but the approach is very chaos magic, and it's seemingly chaos magic through and through. It's a glorious book. It really is. So, what are some of the techniques of chaos magic? Well, it could be anything, right? Because finding what's useful in magic and then try to make it work. And if it doesn't work, you kind of throw it aside. But there are some specific things that seem to keep getting brought up as far as chaos magic is concerned. The first one is sigils. I've done a full sigil episode. Check that out. I just want to do one quick update because I get a lot of emails about this one. And it's about the whole affirmations thing. Don't sigilize for affirmations. Like, don't sigilize for I am a charming man or I'm the sexiest person on earth. A lot of people are saying, like, Doug, all my sigils are for affirmations. And I say, okay, I get it. If you were these things that you want to affirm yourself to be, what would you do? And that's what you sigilize for. I think that's what the main thing that I think that people got a little bit caught up. So if you were a super charming person, what would you do with your charm? Okay, sigilize for that. The charm will come. Another thing that was big in chaos magic, and still is to this day, and I hear about it all the time, not that it's a bad thing, is servitors. How would you define a servitor?
well, it's like an autonomous sigil according to people.
Yeah.
I'm in a weird place with servitors. I've used them a couple of times and I didn't quite enjoy the results. I don't know how to describe that.
Yeah.
Like I prefer the more, I guess, traditional, more witchy familiar.
Yeah.
And I know they're not the same thing, but they serve very similar functions. I don't know, like I guess someone could say, "Oh,
Absolutely.
those are the same thing," but so I like the more style of familiar of like really building a relationship with the thing. And the only thing is like I know with the servitor, it doesn't really have that much of a personality. I guess if you do it right,
Right.
and a familiar kind of
Does. Yeah.
yeah, then they can be prickly, and like that can be an annoyance. The result, and like now you're dealing with this personality at the same time.
So a servitor is basically it's a specific purpose psychological complex that you make into an entity. You can give them a name, you can give them some traits, you can give them a symbol, and then you create them and you give them little tasks, and they do these things. So very much like what Gaius was saying is that it's almost like a witch's familiar, but a little less personal, basically. Yeah, servitor is big in chaos magic. I have never used them. I'm just going to put this out there. Yeah, I've never used them. I've been obsessed with Egyptian deities and Greek deities and saints. And saints, since I was like 16, I've been obsessed with saints. I just used them. And they seem to have more personality. And I'm just going to say it. They had more blood in them for me. Yeah, I can't talk too much about servitors because I don't really use them. And I never have. Here's something everybody wants to fucking talk about. Egregores. Egregores. Oh, egregores or egregores or whatever we want to talk about. What are egregores? They are thought forms, right? Well, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Why do you think everybody wants to talk about these things these days, guys?
the idea does have utility, but it's like to me sometimes it's like almost like a dirty word. It's like, oh, their spirits are egregores. My spirits are the real thing, and this is like a lot of egregore talk I hear about.
The idea of memes or mimetic magic and all of this stuff where something bubbles up on 4chan or on the internet, and then it just spins and starts gaining more and more traction, and then becomes an entity from everybody's thoughts, and it grows and it has a life of its own, and it's almost like a golem that you can't control, and it's unleashed on the world. And I think an example somewhat recently was Gary Lockman in his book Dark Star Rising, when he talks about Pepe the Frog, the meme, becoming an egregore, basically. And then they found out that there was an Egyptian god. The egregores are, they are not created by one person. Like a servitor, they're created by a whole group of people, and everybody kind of adds their thing, and then next thing you know, it's unleashed on the world, and it has a will of its own, which is very popular. And I get why it's popular, because we live in a culture now where you can have a conversation with somebody else using only memes. So I get why this is very popular for people. Phil Hine has recently come out. I don't think he had an essay, but he basically just said, I'm fucking sick of egregores, or egregores. I will echo that sentiment. Yeah, enough with the egregores, everybody. I know they're cool, and they sound cool, but...
I could mention a quick story. Like, I know why egregores get popular in other places, because they get popular in a lot of left-hand path, air quotes. Yeah, groups, and there was a lot of accusations that certain temples were using egregores against their acolytes, and we have the real, like, we're talking to the real demons on our side, and it was so, like, I like watching crazy people. But what I found so interesting is, like, it was weird how egregore itself became an egregore, because it entered the conversation and then started to dominate it, as egregores are described to has done. That's what's fun about you guys, like, screaming about people talking about egregores, is that the word egregore has become the egregore that is, haunting you.
You know what? You're not too far off there. Most certainly, the egregore, I love that. I might steal that. I'm sorry. But the egregore has become the egregore. Brilliant.
Well, these ideas like chaos magic techniques, like if you examine them like egregore, though, the reason people like them, because the touch of chaos magic is everywhere. Like trad witches, Wiccans are doing chaos sigils on TikTok,
Oh, yes.
And so it's like they're everywhere, and it's because these ideas have so much utility.
They do.
And sometimes they can burn you out, though. I can tell you, sure.
Oh, yes. Very much so. Very, very much so. Cut-ups. We've got to talk about cut-ups. Now, cut-ups, in a way, came from an artist by the name of Brian Gaius, who lived for a short period of time, where I lived for a short period of time, in Edmonton, Alberta. The more you know with Doug Batchelor on What Magic Is This. Cut-ups are interesting. It's basically taking, it's like a portmanteau of taking bits of text or pictures or sound and jumbling them up and creating something brand new out of the assemblage of what you're creating. Burroughs says that they can be used for political warfare, for scientific research, for personal therapy, for divination, and for conjuration. Strangely enough, William Burroughs was a member of the IoT for period of time. It's used for breaking barriers and to create something new. They kind of have a life of their own. The taking two different things and making something new creates some kind of strange magic. Dave Lee would talk about how to create a love spell, you take a picture of one person and a picture of another person, and you create a brand new picture, and they're together as one being, and you got yourself a nice little love spell there. Cut-ups I haven't used too much. I did when I was first interested in chaos magic. They didn't do it for me, but yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting for people to look up, and Genesis Purge has done a lot of work. I believe did a lot of audio cut-up stuff. The guy to go to for that would be Keats Ross of the Prag Magic podcast. I believe he does a lot of work with cut-ups as well. The Gnostic state. So a lot of this came from Austin Osman Spare and his idea of the death posture, which is entering into a state where you can, again, trick your mind and put in very interesting stuff in there, sneak stuff into the subconscious or the unconscious. This can be called gnosis. There's three different kinds. There's inhibitory, which is meditation, relaxing yourself to basically, once you're relaxed, you can kind of sneak things into the unconscious. There's ecstatic, in which it's about arousal. Sex magic gets used in this way a lot. Heightened awareness, shock, watching a scary movie and then you sneak in something to your unconscious, the kind of thing. And then there's also indifferent gnosis, which is do something so goddamn boring that then you're able to sneak something into your mind. Of these three, when I did use them quite a bit, it was actually the indifferent that was the most fruitful for me, strangely enough. Have you experienced or experimented with the Gnostic state at all on your end?
See, this is where I might be controversial, and I don't ever know about trance states, and I might be revealing it, but I've done heroic dose of mushrooms. I've done all types of things. The
Shock.
salvia, and
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what a trance state like people say these trance state, and I don't know if what I'm in right now is a trance state. I
Right.
just don't. And so I've always kind of almost been mad and jealous at people who can talk so confidently about them, because I meditate and just struggle with myself for
Yeah.
15 minutes in
Yeah.
in all those things. But when I need to use, I guess, whatever that is, I seem to be able to do it. I question whether it's an assumption that you need to use trance states. I question that assumption on its head, and I wonder if to do magic, you just do magic in your head, and trance states help, or whatever we call trance states help.
Right.
But I wonder if the process is even needed if you really just focused on this happens or whatever. I don't even know how to describe it.
No,
But that's my weird subjective experience with it.
I know exactly what you're saying, because a lot of people will just be like, I just go into a trance and then this thing will happen immediately. Guess what? No, you don't have to. It's one of the many, many techniques for making magic work. It really is. No, I know exactly what you're saying. Yes, there are people. I can go into a trance somewhat easily from my end. It took a lot of work. It's not the only way, and guess what? It's not even sometimes the most effective way of this whole sneaking something into the unconscious or the subconscious, which we don't even have a fucking map for itself. So I get where the trepidation comes from, guys. I really, really do. But
Well, yeah, it's just I don't know if I've experienced it or not, because anything that anyone else has kind of described to me, I'm like, I've never been that out of control, I guess.
Right.
That's what I would associate it with, was being totally in a trance and out of control. And I'm like, how would that be helpful? I'm trying to actually assert more control. I don't know, and maybe I am hitting a trance state, and I just doubt it. I prefer Aidan Walker. I felt was honest in six ways when he described it as more daydreaming. It's
Yes.
yeah, I could totally stare at my computer screen when I'm supposed to be working, and totally wondering what color a demon's scales are, and imagining the monochrome. I could totally, is that it? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But then other people describe that they see all these colors and stuff. I'm like, no, that ain't me. I wish that launching a sigil was more spectacular, as opposed to just kind of staring at it and then, all right, yeah, that one's done. That's. I know if I ever showed people sigil magic the way I do it, they'd be like, that looks like the unspectacular.
Yeah. Different strokes for different folks, and how you go about putting yourself into a trance, whether it be hypnagogia, as I talked about last episode, or holotropic breathing, or any of these things. It's like that expression of pornography. I don't know what pornography is, but I know it when I see it. A trance is, you don't know what it is, but you know when you're in one. I'll put it that way. I don't know if that helps people, but you know when you're there, and it takes work. It just takes a lot of work. Something that's really big for chaos magic is the idea of shamanism. Now, this is a somewhat troublesome term. I think a lot of people have the idea of shamanism as something very specific, and that there was a guild around the world of shamans. No. Just like chaos magic, anybody that you talk to will have a different opinion as to what a shaman actually does. It's not a universal. If there would be something close to universal, it's somebody who somehow, through ingestion of substances, or through trance, if you will, or through any other means, visits a spirit realm or a different realm and brings back bits of information to hey, kitty. I know you guys can't see that, but a cat, Gaius is familiar, decided to pay a visit.
No, that's Maximus. He's too useless to be a familiar.
Oh, poor kitty.
But I still like him.
Good, okay. Keep him around. What a shaman will do is they'll bring back information, and then they'll be able to help their tribe or to heal in some way. And I know that sounds really, really somewhat simplified. Shamanism to chaos magicians, they keep bringing the words up. shamanism, and it's a big thing. It's tied to the Gnostic state in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, I think specifically Pete Carroll was like, when I was talking about shamanism back in the day, I don't think I really knew what shamanism was. And I think the term gets thrown around quite a bit. Not to say that it doesn't exist, and not to say that it's not important. It's just one of those things that early conceptions of shamanism in chaos magic, I think they're overemphasized and underexplained. We'll just put it that way. Synchromysticism. That's where you pack your life full of crazy connections. Everything is significant, and you live in a world that is just suffused with meaning at every moment of every day. And I've experienced this, and it's really cool. I'm going to read a little bit here from Gordon White about synchromysticism from Pieces of Eight. How does technical Hermetica work? How does Kabbalah work? Simply put, both work because some things are associated with other things. Symbols recur, patterns repeat, sounds heard on a radio associate with similar outcomes in your life. An animist universe speaks a language of symbol and synchronicity, to you, to itself, to the birds. This awareness underpins systems of magical correspondence the world over, such as practical Kabbalah or technical Hermetica. They are all parsed through their own worldviews, most of them too textually based for my own liking, and focusing on one or using one to explain another is to throw away the candy bar and eat the wrapper. Fuck, I love that. It's amazing. These systems are indications that the universe speaks in a symbolic language, which is why ritual works in the first place. But they do not constitute the entirety of the language. They are at best small phrase books picked up at an airport on your way to Babel. Certainly use them, but use them in a wider synchronistic context. They provide interpretations, translations of the language of the universe. Yeah, there's a lot of the word, and this is no shade, the word synchronicity is thrown around a lot these days, and I get it. Yeah, the synchromysticism is a very useful tool. In my opinion, the best part of Aleister Crowley's book, Magic Without Tears, I think it's literally in like the introduction where he talks about walking out of your house, and as I walk out of my door, that is Daleth from the Hebrew alphabet, and then I look at my window, and that is He from the Hebrew alphabet. That is kind of synchromysticism in a way, to see all the connections and the correspondences through symbol sets and all of this kind of thing. But again, you don't confuse that for the entire fucking point of magic, is all I'll say. If this kind of stuff is interesting to you, you have to find this gentleman by the name of Paul Weston. He is a synchromysticism and synchronicity machine. He has his own very idiosyncratic way of doing this through journal writing and just being in a magical place. He lives in Glastonbury. If you want to see synchromysticism in action, look towards his work. And his books are quite excellent as well. Have you had a day yourself, Gaius, where it was just like every fucking thing, and it's wonderful when it happens, but it's scary and just so bizarre, where everything is just synchronicity after synchronicity?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've had that. I kind of like, mine's like right now, like at a low dial where it happens nice and evenly, like, I don't know how to describe it, but like maybe once every other day now.
Yeah.
And I like it at that level. When it gets too high, it gets, I'm losing like PTO time at work to run out to like stare at birds at the park because like I saw a bird when I was going inside and it warned me of something that was going to happen when I got into work. Yeah, I was like, it's kind of fun though when you do have the day to like let your synchronies just run you wild.
It's crazy when it happens, and if you start to lean into magic, it's almost like inevitable that it will happen. Strangely enough, and it's great when it does happen. For sure. But yes, so those are some of the techniques that are part and parcel with the ideas of chaos magic. From about 2009 to 2011, we entered into a phase that it can be called post-chaos. Questions were raised about chaos magic itself and the interpretations of using anything as a framework for magic. Indeed, Phil Hine himself began to question the idea that all magic can be formulated in terms of techniques and that cultural historical contexts do not matter. The idea that there is no difference between, say, Superman and Apollo, chaos magic for a period of time said no, there isn't. Sorcerer Jason Miller calls out to something that resonates with using superheroes, that a lot of people say, I'm using a superhero or a comic book character in my magic because more people believe in this character than they do with the old gods like Zeus and whatnot. And Miller is, I think, 100% right in here. He says, no, people don't believe in these heroes. People are just paying attention. Attention is different than belief. I think he's entirely correct. And it's one of those things that if you do start to play around with using fictional characters for your magic, sometimes it works. The excuse that more people believe in these things these days, paying attention does not mean belief. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Gaius, at all.
Well, my argument, because I'm glad you brought up Jason Miller, because I remember when I was on one of those deep dives and finding that series of blog posts and a comic chain between him and Gordon about post-chaos magic.
Right.
And particularly he pointed out that it took me a while to figure out why people, why even myself felt like it was egregious to replace, say, Apollo with Superman. My whole argument is there is a big difference to the mechanisms that bring Apollo to people's imaginations and into myths, and I hate to say it like this, but a late capitalist system that creates a character to sell merchandise and comic books and bringing that to the imagination. One is deeply, I hate to say it, but more profound. Apollo is more profound. It's more natural. It's, I would say, less corrupted by the things that would corrupt, say, something owned by Disney or Warner Brothers.
Right.
When we talk about Apollo, we're talking about a god that was also known by another name, and something that was inspired by centuries of storytelling and myth sharing and experiences, compared to guy made an American colored alien super person to fight crime and sell toys. To me, it's just I guess you can do that. I guess, like you said, no one's stopping anybody from doing it, but your mileage may vary.
Yes. And I think that attitude was what really started making people ask questions. If it's results based, how good are your results even? It was almost one of those, okay, did you really get the results that you said you were getting? Of course I did. The strange period of time where all of these things started to get talked about, I do remember it quite a bit. Some of the things that were being brought up around this time is the idea of a lack of initiation for a lot of chaos magic, or chaos magic in general. I know that Alan Chapman talked about how that's something that's missing that is essential to magic. I disagree with Alan on this in a lot of ways, but we are doing a disservice to say that we don't have access to learn about many, many traditions and how they initiated and what initiation meant to them. And this allows us to ask what initiation means to ourselves. There is the argument that chaos magic is highly appropriative, that it is ignorantly extractive, and for a time this certainly did seem the case. Finally, this post-chaos kerfuffle is not so much a kerfuffle. It was a step back in a way to just take a look at chaos magic, was the idea that it's, again, it's all in your head, that the gods are the same, this god from this religion is the same as this god from this religion, and we need to understand that this all in your head stuff, the idea of purely psychological magic, which was big, and what I did talk about before chaos magic, chaos took this idea specifically through Austin Spare and basically said that, hey, we can use the psychological model as a premise. It remains a premise, it is not the finding. Because you do get guys like Grant Morrison basically saying, yeah, it's all in your head. This is not the point of chaos magic, at least not to me.
Well, it's one of the ironies where chaos magicians, especially chaos magicians who infuse so much materialism into what they do accept the cultural, materialist standard.
Right.
They're totally, well, it has to be psychology because they've decided on a dogma. And that was the exact opposite of what you were supposed to do. You're supposed to utilize the belief, find the utility of the belief. Dare I say, not actually fall for it at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah.
And you should be more flexible than that. And it's always one of those, you're going for absolutes. And then I would also argue that it isn't psychology. And if you do it right, you'll have lots of experiences that will go, all right, that was definitely not just my head.
Yeah.
and that's been my experience, and I came at it with an open mind, and you start experiencing things. It's not in your head. And
no,
even Pete derailed. Even he was against just pure materialism, and he definitely understood that it's weird that they would fall into a dogma. But I guess that's the issue with chaos magic, that being utterly chaotic all the time is in itself a dogma.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. That's funny. So what about now? Let's talk about now, as in 2020. well, at least when this episode comes out, is chaos magic still around? So I would contend that chaos magic is stronger than it has ever been. That the recognition that chaos magic is not fixed, the things that Pete Carroll wrote over 35 years ago were useful at the time, but even he has moved on, needs to be recognized. We do recognize also what is useful about the pragmatism of chaos magic, which is, did you get the result? Did you get the results that you were looking for? And this is very important and very crucial. I'd say that the impulse has shifted from what used to be one in the mid-90s, one of certainty within chaos magic, to one of curiosity. And one of the major reasons for this was something that Gaius talked about earlier, that chaos magic didn't go through a reformation. It went through a counter-reformation, one in which it was getting back to the roots of what chaos magic initially came up from. Not so much the ideas that were floating around at the time, but the impulse as to why this magic was somewhat effective and why it was so appealing to people. How did this counter-reformation really kick off for chaos magic? I'd say there were two things, and I've talked about them many times on this podcast. That is context and comparison. So let's start with the latter, comparison. Not saying that gods or the techniques of magic are the same, but that they very well might be similar is very important. The how. Again, I keep talking about it in this podcast. The how instead of the what of things. And how are they similar? And then also, how are they different? There is more information about things that we can compare between not just religions or mythologies or even magic as much as 150 to 300 years ago. We have other things that's on the table now. Things like near-death experiences. It's easier to get information. And I'm going to read here, specifically when talking about how not just magic, but experiences in general that can be put through some kind of a comparative viewpoint. And this is referring specifically to near-death experiences. Now we have thousands of cases of people coming back after describing other worlds. The sheer volume of accounts is increased by, 10,000%? This is a new data set. The Victorian magicians did not have it. The grimoirists, they did not have it. Renaissance magicians did not have it. The priests of the classical age did not have it. We have it. And what have we done with it? Fuck all. Now I want you to picture all those dead wizards you idolize going back through history. I want you to see them sitting around a table poring over Raymond Moody and Pim Van Lommel's research, and then looking up at you and asking, are you fucking kidding me? At the end of the table sits the shamans of the Neolithic and Paleolithic. They are the angriest. They have had to poison themselves to death, vomiting and shitting in front of an entire tribe on a weekly basis until their inevitably early demise, just to bring back fragments of what we have access to on our cell phones. I like that for chaos magic, everything is on the table now. There's no way that we can disregard these kind of things. And as occultists or magicians, we can't just say they don't matter. Everything from UFOs to near-death experiences to telepathy, it all has to be part of the mix now, part of the conversation. It can't not be for us to continue to succeed. Chaos magic recognizes this need now. And in a cheeky way, current chaos magic has taken an iconoclastic look at other traditions and seen how slight some of them are. This goes for a lot of the things post-chaos magicians say they have more juice in them than chaos magic. Many seem to be broadly followed parameters and techniques tethered by stringent, ludicrous, horribly dated viewpoints. No wonder why sometimes you just want to smash and grab. We also have context, which I think is the most important thing. Not to say that there wasn't context before, but that now it is more important than ever. Understanding the magic that came before works in so much that there are deep structures which are highly conserved through time. These cannot be ignored anymore, and you cannot merely go haywire and willy-nilly swapping things out because you do not like them or you think that something could be cooler. this has to be realized. It does not mean that they are encased in ambers, these traditions. Much like Gaius was saying when the hesitancy when being a grimoire purist, seeing the way of chaos magic. There is this thing that has been happening for a little while where, yeah, it's like you have to do absolutely everything as it says in this book. This is certainly not the case. At least I don't think so anymore. More investigation will usually reveal how these things have adapted, how things have dropped, things have been added to them, specifically because they are useful. In a way, the more you look at this magic historically, the more you see that chaos magic has been around for a lot longer than we think it has. Indeed, things like the Greek magical papyri seem to suggest that the chaos toolbox is the defining aspect of magic. So what does this toolbox look like now? What does chaos magic strive for these days? From Pieces of 8. There's about 8 things. 1. A preference for observable magical results over unfounded claims of mystical insight. 2. An awareness of the capacity of personal beliefs to shape the experiences of those that hold them. 3. A virulent suspicion of mystical and political and scientific authority. 4. Probabilistic or random interpretations of events are prioritized over mystical or spiritual ones. 5. A fierce iconoclasm when it comes to the rules and taboos of Western magic. 6. A realization that quality fiction sometimes provides equal or better interpretive models, given that artists are proven to be more reliable narrators than either scientists or wizards. 7. A lifelong dedication to the study of history of ideas and magic, and a recognition that this study is one of the most expedient routes to apotheosis. And 8. Having money is generally better than not having money, particularly for those who claim to command the forces of the universe, and so economic literacy is also valued. I love chaos magic. I started with chaos magic, and it was one of those things where I dropped off for a little bit because I thought there were more austere forms of magic. So the question can be asked, Doug, are you a chaos magician? And I say yes, I am a chaos magician, of course. Personally, I think it's foolish to not have this toolbox in this day and age, the chaos magic toolbox. One of the more vocal and interesting characters within hip-hop, KRS-One, he was asked the difference between rap and hip-hop, and he said, rap is something you do. Hip-hop is something you live. For me, magic is something you do. Chaos is something you live. And that's it, guys. That's the episode on chaos magic. Have I missed anything? Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I believe that is it. At least for part 1.
Part 1. Guys, you made it through. Fantastic. We've been recording for nearly 2 hours. My goodness. Your poor cat. I hope it doesn't have to go outside or something like that. Oh, wait, those are dogs you have to put outside. Or do you put your cat outside?
I don't put my cat outside.
He's not allowed
outside.
Oh, that's poor thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just want people to know that this is, again, part 1. Part 2 will be coming up somewhat shortly here. Gaius, you have a YouTube channel. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your YouTube channel?
Yeah, I post random videos of my weirdness on YouTube. You could just look up Gaius Sorcery. You can also find me on Twitter at Gaius Sorcery, and you can find me on TikTok at Gaius Sorcery.
You've trademarked them all, right?
Yeah, not yet, but we'll see.
I want to draw a bit more attention to Gaius's YouTube. There's not a ton of videos out right now, but I really enjoy them. And you did a video about paganism and Christianity and the grimoires. You have some very interesting perspectives that I think that are somewhat important, and I hope more people will cotton on to watching your videos because they are quite good. And you go through book reviews. You reviewed Mastering Witchcraft, and you reviewed 6 Ways. I think that hopefully people will take a look at the work that you do. And I guess what I'm saying is that I want to see more from you. I think you've got a very interesting perspective. Specifically, talking to you through Twitter and stuff like that. It's always good conversation that I've had with you.
Thank you.
Do you want to tell people about the last video you did there about summoning demons? Because I think that's right up my alley.
Raising the devil.
Raising the devil. Apologize.
Yeah, it's just the concept of raising the devil. I like the devil a whole lot because I guess he's a bit chaotic, but when you look at characters, even through like the Western canon, I'm talking Western canon here, how like we're usually all raised, and it's imbued you if you aren't raised that way. But it's like there's God. and there's the devil.
Yeah.
Well, out of that entire canon, the only person who's ever sort of gave God a run for his money is the devil. He's the one who got humanity kicked out of Eden. He's the one who, rebelled in heaven. So, like, if you're going to raise and, like, if you can't talk to God, like, for some reason, like, that Christianity damage doesn't allow you to talk to God, well, like, the next best thing's the devil. Like,
It's
because
gotta
he's
be.
the only one who's ever contended with God, at least from our mythological standpoint. And it's the one sort of, like, pagan spiritual idea that Christianity could not get rid of. Like,
Right.
that it became the hidden enemy that it constantly sought.
The awesome opponent of God.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's to me that's I love exploring that idea,
Right.
and it gives me a way also to parse with Christianity in a more meaningful way than it's all junk and I'm going to go be Hellenistic now, which is what which I understand the temptation,
Yep.
but like if you think that raising a 2,000-year-old religion up from the grave is going to fix spirituality in the West, I'm going to slap your books out of your hand.
For sure. I'd like to see some more videos, and for people, please head to on YouTube. Just look up Gaius Sorcery. There will be links in the show notes to all of Gaius's work, and yeah, it was fantastic having you on. So,
Thank you so much
no
for having me
worries.
on. It's cool, like, because everyone thinks about their quid pro quo question, and like I would listen to every episode coming up and like, please don't ask him. No one else ask him. I want to ask him.
Oh, you really wanted to hear about my knickers, you pervert. Ah, man.
Right? It's the comedic answer.
Yeah.
It's like an OG meme if you remember like early forums and days. Like I don't know if you ever saw like
OG.
the
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, like I remember so many forums that there would always be like the master thread is boxers or briefs or do you shave down there, and there would always be like 3 years and 1,000 replies of people in length discussing these important ideas.
The halcyon days.
Yeah.
Where things moved a little bit slower, and back in the day we had one meme and that would last us for 5 months. These
Oh
days
yeah.
these days you got memes coming out everywhere. It's nonstop. So for those interested, head to whatmagicisthis.com. There you can find a way to subscribe to my podcast on iTunes, on Spotify, hey, if they've got podcasts, I'm going to be listed. Also on my website, you will find my Twitter, you'll find Facebook, and you'll find Instagram. They're all there. As mentioned, every episode's got show notes. This one, there'll be some excellent show notes. There'll be that talk from Dave Lee about early chaos magic, and we'll also have the links to find out some of Gaius's work, which will be fantastic. If you like the show, please leave a review. I know the whole star clicky thing on iTunes is pretty cool, but if you write a couple of words about me, that's greatly appreciated because, words have a bit more currency, and people like reading about my show. I know the stars speak, but guess what speaks louder? Words, because that's what makes them words. If you enjoy the show, tell a friend. Yeah, please. Sharing is caring. And if people have interests that are weird, like you, because I know you do, you weirdo, please tell them, get them listening to the show. If you have any questions, any question at all, please reach out. I'm very approachable. I'm super keen to talk about anything you guys want to, experiences, any stuff, recommendations, that kind of thing. Again, I get a lot of people asking, where do I start with magic? The books that I've shared today has many recommendations. Those are a really great place to start, I would say. And thank you, everybody, for the support. My last show, when I talked about maybe trying to find a way to set up a Patreon or something like that, I'm kicking some ideas around. Thank you to everybody who reached out, said that I'm on board. I don't care what it is, but I want to help you out, Doug. That's really heartening. Thank you so much for all of that. I've still got to figure out what I want to do. I got to talk with myself and with some spirits, and who knows, maybe even go to the crossroads and talk to old Scratch and see what he's got to say, or she, or it. Yeah, that's it. That's the show, and we got to end the show with the post-show quid pro quo. Guys, you ready?
Yeah, I guess so.
Don't be nervous. Maybe a little bit. You're married and you got a kid, man. How does having a child affect your magic in any way? Does it enter into the equation at all?
I have 2 children,
Yeah.
and they're neat little diviners for me sometimes.
Oh yeah.
We like to go to the park. I like to let them lead the way sometimes. They find interesting things.
Nice.
I don't know. You see how well, I guess I should make a point here is both my children are nonverbal autistic, so it's a unique situation, but you're still interested. Like, every kid has imaginary friends and the way they imagine things and what the imaginal is and its relation to magic. Kids, if you so decide to have them, they can really give you an insight to a more innocent side and a more innocent way to interface with, I guess, reality or this world or it. And to me, that's at the heart of magic and
Yeah.
animism, especially. And kids are definitely interesting because they're more pure at it.
Yeah,
They're just
they
they are
are.
just more pure at it, and they just will have an imaginary friend. And what is having like a familiar or a servitor, but not having literally an imaginary friend?
Fantastic. I love your answer, and thank you so much for your honesty. That's amazing, man. Yeah. I'm getting older, and I want kids. My broveries are screaming these days. Yeah. So you're a lucky man. You really are. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show, guys. I hope if I was to ask you to come back on the show, you would.
I definitely would. I love being on here. This show's great. All right, this show's great.
Thank you so much for the kind words. And everybody, thank you so much for listening. Come on back. We'll talk about all this wonderful, crazy, spectacular, alive, chaotic, sexy world of magic. That's the show, everybody. Tune in next time. Stay luminous, and we'll talk at you soon. Bye bye.